joint meeting of the BCTDA Public Authority and the BCTDA Nonprofit Corporation. We have a small crowd back there, but could you folks stand up and say your name and your affiliation?
Sure. I'm John Castlin with PGA Destinations. I'll be presenting along with Mike Conson for the.
Thank you. I'm Chris Cavanaugh of Magellan Strategy Group.
Holden Mask with Sunshine Request.
Good morning, I'm Kathy Peterson with KP Communications.
Tim Bradford, Asheville, Buncombe Regional Sports Commission.
Morning, Chris Corral with the U.S. Cellular Center.
Morning, Bob Michelle with the Asheville Homestay Network.
Jim Muth, former TDA member and recent addition to the peanut gallery.
Did you get your breakfast?
Hi, Jason Sandwich with Buncombe.
Jane Anderson, National Independent Restaurant Association. Yes.
Good morning, John Beatty, North Carolina Restaurant Lodging Association.
Great, welcome. Nice to have you. Julie, was the meeting that bad last night?
Anybody
Yeah.
watch? Besides Jim?
Nobody did.
You guys can answer. It was long, that's for sure.
It was on. Productive though, right? I was going to start off with you, but I figured if you went first, everybody would leave. So we wouldn't listen.
I think the news of everything we did is already out there, so.
All right. Motion for the minutes. Anybody? Want you? All in favor? Don, financial reports, you ready?
Sure. So this morning we're presenting the August 2019 financial statements. On page 1 for the operating fund, in the second column under the current month actual, you'll see for the month of August, revenue totaled just over $1.946 million, and expenditures totaled just over $655,000. Revenues exceeded expenditures by $1.29 million for the month, contributing to the to-date net change in fund balance of $614,000, which is in the third column near the bottom. In the fifth column, the percentage of budget used, 10.1% of the budget occupancy tax has been collected for fiscal year 20, and 6.8% of budgeted expenditures have been sent at the end of August. On page 2, this shows the 75-25 split of occupancy tax between operating and product development. Under the operating fund, you'll see that the revenue was reported on page 1 in August relates to the room sales in July. Revenue for room sales is up 5% from the same time last year, and year-to-date we're up 5%. Not very shocking there. On page 3 is the product development fund summary as of August 31st. We have $23.3 million committed to projects, and $699,000 is allocated to administrative expenditures. And to date, we have just over $2.1 million, or we're at 8.8% of budget. On page 4, this shows your balance sheet for each fund. Gives you a snapshot of the assets, liabilities, fund balance for each fund as of the point in time of August 31st. And then the following pages, which are 5 through 8, they show comparative tables and charts for room sales data. Page 5 charts room sales by the month, as well as comparative data for the prior year, and you can see room sales are trending above prior year and the 3-year average. Page 6 provides a breakout of monthly room sales by category, and then page 7 provides your history of room sales by the month, and as you can see, it's trending above prior years. And then page 8 just gives further information on room sales by category compared to prior years.
Nice and easy there, huh? Any questions on the budget? No? Call for a motion?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? I neglected to mention that James Poole is our new board member. He got approved last night. James, welcome.
Like less than
Found
12
you
hours
ago.
ago.
Less than 12 hours. Well done.
Everybody commented on the fact that it was signed, so.
That's-
I'm sure you slept well last night. Okay, president's reports. Okay.
Thank you. I'll just ask everyone to turn to the dashboard behind tab 3 of your books.
see that, and as consistent with the financial report you just received, that lodging sales were up 6.3% across all lodging types. In July, we have our best data is reported from hotels, and so we use that as a good indicator of responsiveness to our marketing efforts. Hotel demand in July was up 3.7%. That absorbed the supply increase of 1.5%, so that we had positive occupancy growth of 2.2 points. Turn to the next page, you can see that we're not showing supply and demand in the short-term rental stats. I'll also point out that the change from my normal word of caution about this data source of AirDNA had for a long time only include Airbnb, and now it includes VRBO and Home and Away. But that only goes back to 2017, so it kind of messes up our comparability over a long period of time, but it enhances our appreciation of the short-term rental market today. So we have like 1 year of comparative data. Elizabeth, the person who's in charge, Elizabeth White, in charge of our analytics and website, has dug into that a little deeper, and AirDNA thinks that they're capturing about 90% of the short-term rental market. So we can see that we had a little bit of a slowing in the growth rate for occupancy, and ADR and RevPAR posted slight decreases in July. Move on to the sales leads. I'd like to, you're seeing a little red ink. It's early in the fiscal year, and months can be bumpy up and down, but I would like for Diana to give us a little background color to kind of appreciate where we are.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I also asked for a few minutes to kind of address some of the slowdown that we're seeing in the group numbers for future business. That's what this is about. It's about future business. So looking at the group numbers, you can see that in August, the leads turned definite and room nights definites were down month over month, and the same for fiscal year to date over the comparable time. Now, 2 months does not a year make, right? We're behind pace, and again, we're talking about future bookings, which to us is concerning. My team needs to book to stay on pace about 6,800 rooms per month to meet our year-end goal. We only count a group when it's solid, when an agreement is reached. But if you also look, what's kind of curious about this situation, if you also look at the sales leads pipeline for August over the previous time, and for fiscal year to date, the pipelines are up. The pipelines are up, sales leads are up, but commitments are down, which is kind of a curious situation. What our team believes, and again, this is maybe different for other teams because we only handle a portion of the business coming into town, is that people and organizations tend to be sitting on contracts or they're holding off on decisions. I'm hearing some similar stories and a little softness from other hotel partners, and again, this is for future business. We know that there's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace, internationally, nationally, regionally, which we deal on all those levels, and we are working hard to make our September numbers. So, all that being said, what are we doing about it? Well, last month we shared with you a new meeting campaign, which included a strong outreach focusing on targeting new acquisition accounts. And one of the ways that we're doing it too is through direct mail. If you look at our August indirect, we reached a outreach level of about 36,000 indirect outreaches. A good portion of that is targeting new acquisition accounts using direct mail. We're working with a new company called Convention Planet that has some really deep access in the meetings world, so we're doing some targeted blasts with them. Our activity level is high, our individual sales team outreach is high, our sponsorships are good. What we're doing now is we're really just trying to review our processes. Can we do things faster? we do something more targeted? Are we getting the maximum? Are we getting every single ounce of energy out of the sponsorship, out of the trade shows? So again, 2 years does not, 2 months does not a year make, and I'm confident that we will get our numbers to the year end where they need to be. But the recent trend for me is something that I am watching, and trying to act upon as much as we are able to influence.
Diana, are we maximizing that incentive program? How much, what is the balance of that, and are we using it?
In fact, we utilize that, saying that if people who had contracts outstanding were to close their business by September 30th, we would increase percentages. I don't have the balance right now, I can get that for you, but we're using it as a tool to get these contracts signed, because that's what we think's happening, is people are.
Do you have enough in the fund?
We'll ask for more.
Oh, yeah, don't worry, we will definitely ask for more, but we're looking at, like I said, we doubled it, so get the contracts in, let's get these signed, let's get these numbers on the books.
Yeah, we need this for compression.
Yeah, I mean, we're having those conversations for like, you know, we've been in, I mean, the destination over the last many years has not been in a position to buy business, right? And so we've looked for, you know, leveraging the appeal of the destination and these other value propositions to attract the business we want. We're moving more heavily into, you know, looking for where can we fill rooms by offering bid fees, enhancing our investment in those kinds of things. You know, just being more aggressive as, you know, as the, you know, we see some slowdown in tourism nationally, you know, so I just think the strategy is changing to be one that's more aggressively investing and attracting business in kind of different kinds of ways. So, yeah, no worries, we'll definitely bring you those requests.
Yeah, good. Just a couple of things. One is, what Gary mentioned about compression, I think it's more important than ever now, because overall numbers are up, positive, which is good, but as we all know, our county is, we have divided our county into 6 pockets, and some of those outlying pockets of south, east, west, are year over year they're down.
All of the
Couldn't see it anymore.
suburbs are down.
So as more hotels are coming into city center and central business district, the compression becomes more important, so that they fill up first and then we feel the impacts on the outskirts. So, and is there a comparison data for other destinations that we compete with or groups that shows their conversion rates, or not conversion rates, but like we get star reports and I can look at my comp set and see, are we getting our fair share of business, for example, that's coming into the market? Is there something like that for group sales that shows?
A lot of this stuff,
are we
a lot of the
getting fair share?
resources for group sales are more convention center oriented.
Okay.
And we've had a hard time finding comparable markets that do not have a convention center that are controlled by the CVB, but have a large leisure, you know, tourism component. Diane, you know, we've invested in the research with Miles that, you know, kind of, you know, gives us some meeting planner based insights, but, you know, there's the TAP report and, you know, all the sources I'm familiar with are more geared towards a destination where, yes, you're controlling that. And there, you know, there are other, there's a survey that's done every year that just absolutely hounds me, and I'm like, we don't have a convention center. Yes, you do. No, we don't. So I guess my answer is going to be no.
That would be a TAP report, but we're not a market that would fit that report, yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, and it, you know, and it's kind of hard because like we don't book the business, and a lot of our activities generate business that is not booked by us, right?
We don't make contracts.
Right, and we don't make the contract.
Right.
So it's, I think, you know, as we progress, there have been studies done on leakage. You know, I think there's opportunity for us to go back to the meeting planners that we've worked with and get a better appreciation of did they book direct, how, you know, and then there's also the big trend of booking outside the block, right? And so you don't know how much of the business that we are booking and tracking has reduced the size of their group because they know they're gonna have leakage outside of the contract, so. But, you know, major point being that, you know, we are sensitive to these performance metrics and, you know, utilizing, you know, looking for strategies to, you know, make sure we don't see more of a.
Well, the drops in leads and room nights are very significant, which is somewhat alarming, really.
Yeah.
I guess the national trend.
Well, and, you know, if you turn to the quick list, you know, July was fine. You know, but we just got numbers for August, and, you know, we're really concerned about that. And, you know, we're kind of digging in and looking for, you know, in our competitive markets, some did better than us, some did worse than us, but, you know, the weather is such a big factor, not only for the weather that affects our comp set, but some of our comp set are feeder markets. So, you know, we're kind of diving in, we're looking at, you know, what's happening with the economy. We're seeing shifts downward in consumer confidence, and consumer confidence usually tracks pretty closely with leisure intent to travel. You know, we know that election years, you know, typically you see close to elections a slowdown in travel because there's an uncertainty and the media is dominating the landscape. Well, you know, that's happening right now, like much further ahead. So, you know, we're kind of digging into that. Next month, you'll hear an update from Marla on, you know, how the campaign is tracking. You know, we've been not just implementing the campaign and letting it go. We're in very deep conversations, understanding the performance, and, you know, continuing to bring additional assets, you know, to the table. So it's kind of early to, you know, be able to give you very tangible insights about that, but we'll bring that to you next month. But just, you know that the performance of the submarkets and August are of concern, and, you know, we're looking for strategies, and, you know, I hope it's a blip and not a trend. So that's, you know, that's kind of where we are.
Thank you.
You know, when looking at the STAR report for August, even though our occupancy dipped, you know, we're still at the top of our comp set for total occupancy, and we're at the top of our comp set for ADR. And so, you know, there's like some like, well, you know, how much volume can we push at those rates? But obviously it's our goal to sustain rate. So, any other discussion about the dashboard? No? Okay. We also have invited the board from Chow Chow to present some results at the next meeting. I don't know how many of you were able to attend. Thought it was, you know, just a top shelf experience. I think the feedback of the people who attended has been, you know, just really enthusiastic.
You're very well done, very professional.
I will also note that, so Stephanie and I both spoke at kind of the opening ceremony, and the last thing the way that ended was we all had a can of beer that we were supposed to shake and then open, and I'm just saying somebody's can of beer spouted the farthest, so you've had some practice on this as well.
Had to practice on the photo op, right? And the beer smelled good too, didn't it?
The beer was delicious. Even if it was warm.
Yeah. No, I mean, really congratulations to the Chow Chow board and the staff, because, you know, I mean, it was just a level above, and I think that it will become an iconic event in the Southeast as we move forward. So, are there any questions about the recap or comments about recent performance?
One thing I'll bring up is it'd be interesting to know with the business, the vacation stuff. What I'm perceiving is happening is everybody's opening up a vacation rental. I think it's the way to make tons of money. So the actual number of units is probably increasing tremendously, because there's a 17% increase in revenue, and yet these numbers are fairly flat or down. So it might be interesting to know that number.
I actually was going to talk to Elizabeth about maybe switching some of the metrics that we're reporting to include
available this year versus available last year.
Right. I haven't looked at that for the most recent month, but we have seen a continued large growth rate, but, a lessening growth rate.
Does the BCTDA data account for a listing of a single property on multiple platforms? Because that happens, right?
It
Yes.
does, it depends on the software. I don't know, we have software that does account for it, I don't know.
I haven't looked at that since they pulled in the other platforms. I would think that's such a basic thing, they would at least be attempting to understand that. That's a good question. It's hard. Elizabeth's been evaluating every single, opportunity to track this stuff.
And almost every few months, there's a new platform that comes on. Now even Hotels.com, Expedia.com, some brands are doing it on their own websites as well. So it's to get that perfect data is going to be hard. So the obvious, how many bookings we actually have is probably better information. You can't book the same house on different platforms for that same weekend.
Right.
So I think that.
But as we're seeing the revenue going up, or the taxes going up or whatever,
Right.
I think it's a result of more people entering
Sure.
rather than the same house.
It's just like the hotels, the revenues are up because there's more hotels and not because everybody's occupancy ADRs are up.
Yeah, and it's, we don't have really a good distinction between the marketing channel that's booking it and the company that owns it, and the difference in our revenue data between a vacation rental management company that's managing a lot of units versus, there's just no, I think, very good understanding of that. But I think, our occupancy tax collections are the overall measurement of, kind of the activity of tourism. And, we have a good appreciation of the total number of visitors and the total spending that occurs as the economic benefit to the community. And so,
Has the county seen an increase in individual people who are turning in occupancy tax, or I know Airbnb does a lump sum, but have you guys seen any?
As far as number of accounts being?
Yeah.
I don't know. It'd be something we'd have to look at to see if we actually have more accounts year over year. Yeah, we can check into it, see.
yeah, I think like the professionals in the room, like the folks who are hosts and I think the community doesn't have a very good appreciation of the complexity that, some people are renting on multiple platforms, and, this night might be remitted through Airbnb, but they have to remit to the county separately on, a night that's sold through Home and Away or through their own website. And so it's a complicated landscape, but the role of this organization is to attract spending from people who visit that benefits, a lot of different businesses. So I think that's it for my report.
Any other questions? Mr. Gonza, you're up.
So thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on our tourism management and investment plan process. My name is Mike Constant. I'm the CEO of PGAV. With me today I have John Kasman, also a Vice President with PGAV, and Chris Kavanaugh with Magellan Strategy Group. And John and Chris are going to help me give you this update today. It's very appropriate that the conversation that just ended was all about data, because that's kind of where we are in this process. We have been very actively and very heavily involved in gathering inputs that are going to inform this process. And so I'm going to quickly run you through a status report of where we are and explain that. And of course, at the end of this, we can entertain questions if that's appropriate. So here's where we are. We are headed towards the end of phase one of this 4-phased process. And what it means to be headed towards the end of it is that we have gathered a great deal of information. We're looking hard at it, and we're starting to synthesize the analysis that can come from that information so that we can then play it back to you and the community as well, and set really a foundation for the path forward. Later on in this presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about looking ahead to phases 2, 3, and 4. But this is an exciting time because we're starting to see some themes emerge that will I think, drive our thinking as we look forward to thinking about investments in the future. So, just in general, you may recognize, if you had seen our original scope of work, some of the language here talking about generating compiled data into a holistic picture of the project's potential and determine strategies to inform the next phase of the project. So this is where we are, and we're going to be working hard over the next few weeks on an existing conditions analysis report. We're giving you a status report today, and then in October, and that date is October 23rd, I'll talk about that more in a minute as well, there will be a presentation to the Public and Community Leadership Council. And so that'll be a point where we can share all this information and the analysis that flowed from that information. So some of the activities that have gone on in the last few months, we've done a broad best practices review and also looked at existing plans here in Asheville and Buncombe County. We've looked at, in an early phase, possibilities for development finance, and that'll be revisited more than once in this process, I predict, as we start to look at projects and the opportunities to do them with innovative approaches to finance, which is a key aspect of this project. A lot of deep digging in market analysis, including look at your local economy, benchmarking against other comparable places, as well as looking at retail and lodging, and it doesn't say it here, but that also includes food and beverage as well in this marketplace. We're using some mobile data analysis that will help us understand patterns of visitor flow, and that is available to us through some more recent technology that we're excited to use here. A couple of formal primary source surveys that were conducted, community sentiment survey and a visitor survey, and then public input workshops. And I think Chris, or in a minute, Chris is going to talk more about that. This is a long list of data sources, and I'm not going to go through them all. I will tell you that for a project like this, this list is probably about as robust as we've seen. This is where the data comes in, because as you know, there are more sources of data available to us every day, but interpreting what the data means and how it applies to a project like this is in fact quite challenging. And oftentimes data begets data. We learn something and then we want to know more about what it means, so we have to dig deeper and cross-reference it to other sources of data. So some of these were here readily available in your community through government sources and others, and some of it were national sources through organizations like ESRI, who has a great deal of consumer data and data related to local population that we could use as we look both at visitor market data and resident market data. Chris, you want to help me with this one?
Yeah. So, Mike asked me to speak on this specifically as a local subconsultant. I was involved with a number of the things you see illustrated up here. One of the things that we started with was community sentiment survey. We received over 2,600 total responses to that survey, which was distributed by local media, local government, and a number of other sources. There is a vast amount of response, as you might imagine, to a survey that has over 2,600 responses. And a lot of it was very good. I was actually very pleased. I'm still going through a lot of that data. That research was conducted by a research company called SMARI, S-M-A-R-I, out of Indianapolis. I'm working with SMARI right now to go through the data, begin an initial analysis of data tables from that. But there's a lot of data, and I was very encouraged by the quality of the data. I also did a survey of recent visitors, people who visited Asheville and Buncombe County in the last 5 years. We received over 1,400 responses to that. just to get some understanding of what the visitor experience is like for those people who have been recent visitors, to understand both what the strengths and weaknesses are of the destination experience, where are the things where Asheville and Buncombe County are on brand and in alignment with the brand that is being promoted, and what we want the kind of experience for our visitors to enjoy, and where it's out of alignment. There's been 2 meetings thus far this summer of the Community Leadership Council, which has 50 members. And that group of representatives, community representatives, will continue to be utilized throughout the process. There were 3 in-person public input workshops that were conducted by PGAV, and I attended each of those. And we had over 200 attendees at each of those. If you attended any of those, you know that we had 7 or 8 different stations set up to collect input from residents. And again, we received a very large amount of input associated with those 3 workshops that were conducted, I guess, back in August. And then finally, there have been at least 20 individual meetings with various stakeholders around the county, and everyone from staff at places like town of Weaverville and Black Mountain, and people in Woodfin, to certainly city and county representatives, representatives of UNC Asheville, Sports Commission, any number of different significant bodies which have not only an interest in this project, but which also potentially have significant projects which may be a part of TMIP and which should be a part of that process. And by the way, I should point out too, those individual meetings will continue with a number of those stakeholders as we get into phase 2. There's a lot of, this, as was said early on, this was intended to be a very collaborative process. So a lot of those meetings continue even as the process has moved into phase 2. But I've been very pleased with the amount and the quality of input received.
Chris, can I ask you a quick
Yes,
question?
please.
How did you identify the visitors? How did you find those?
Those were identified using the Explore Asheville email list. So anyone, and then we screened out anybody who had either never visited Asheville or said they had visited Asheville more than 5 years ago. I think over half of the participants, if I recall, visited sometime within the last year.
Mm-hmm.
Not too surprising. You sign up for an email database before visiting a destination.
Sure.
Strong likelihood you will continue to be on that email database even afterwards. So that was the vehicle used. Good question.
And I'm curious, 2,600 people responding to the community survey seems like a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's an extraordinary number. I mean, I just did a national survey of 800 respondents. That's a lot of.
Asheville having an opinion about that.
Yeah, but yeah, people.
Can I add a
Yeah.
couple things about the community sentiment survey? So we did distribute the survey to a representative sample, so that you would be able to say that on average, this is how residents of Buncombe County, and then there was an oversample for residents of City of Asheville. And then, we really utilized a lot of resources to make sure that people knew that it was available. It was appeared in local newspapers and, was sent to groups and was posted a lot of different places. And so we had an additional 2,200 people who opted into the survey. So we'll be able to look at that average representative view as well as the group of more kind of active participants who chose to take the survey.
Yeah, and we had I should point out too, even with the sample that was purchased with the online purchase sample, we had 468 respondents to that, which I've done a number of studies where we tried to get a large number of households to participate in Buncombe County for local firms, whatever. And 468 is by far the largest that we've ever been able to accomplish on a controlled sample, if you will. So that plus, again, the massive amount of community response was very strong.
And I guess the only other thing I would add to that is that SMARI conducts community sentiment surveys that are similar to this, and so by using a company that does this nationally, it provided some insights for comparability and robust methodologies, and it was a very rigorous approach.
It is, and Smarter is not a member of our team. Actually, they were operating as an independent consultant for this data gathering, which I think gives it, additional validation from my perspective.
And this will be part of what's presented at the next community leadership meeting.
Exactly.
Well, there'll be a public forum on October 23rd.
October 23rd, right?
Speaking of,
There you go.
there we are.
Nice segue.
So, the Ferguson Auditorium at AV Tech, doors open at 5:30, program begins at 6. Please mark your calendars, and we will be sharing the in-depth results of this process in that fashion. And so we're excited about this. We've got, to be perfectly honest with you, we still have a lot of work to do between now and then to pull all this together in a form that is what we want it to represent as far as good, objective, database thinking to lead us to the next phase of this process. But we're very encouraged by the level of data and the state of the analysis as it is today. John's going to give me some help by talking about the remaining phases of the project in a very overview kind of fashion so that you know where we're headed. Because in reality, while we're finishing phase 1 in order to keep our timeline, we've actually embarked on some of the activities of phase 2.
That second slide that showed the timeline and the phases didn't really reflect what Mike just said, right? There's a little bit of an overlap as we finish up phase 1, because we're aiming for that April date of 2020. We know that we want to be conscious and leave enough time and attention for the future phases. So let me talk a little bit about phase 2 and then 3 and 4. These descriptions are similar to what the original scope of work was that we reviewed long ago together in this room. But it's worth a little bit of a summary and a reminder and maybe some examples as well. Chris talked about the stakeholder meetings that we've already accomplished during phase 1, the 20 plus meetings that were mentioned. You get people to gather and talk about strategies and assessment of data, knowing what the process is coming up. It's impossible for people not to bring up projects. And so part of it is not only schedule driven, it's just human nature that people are excited about the projects that are on the table. And that's really what this discovery phase is. It's pulling out and conducting project review work sessions with multiple groups to be able to get all of those projects out on the table. What we see already, the list is a long one, and projects range from all the different stakeholders that we've been discussing. The projects range from projects that are shovel ready, that in some instances the design phase has already been completed and the project was stopped for a certain reason. There's projects that fit that example. There's also ones at the other extreme that are just a gem of an idea that has been talked about for a while, but it just needs some help to actually start to get some legs under. So this process of discovery is an exciting one that lets us get all of those ideas out on the table and start to understand not just the project, but also the why and the strategy behind it and how they might relate to all of the strategies that come from phase 1. So that's part of the process as well, understanding how they relate to the criteria, how they relate to the strategies. So during that phase, we're going to do all those individual sessions. We're reviewing the projects independently and together with the steering committee, and conduct really a round robin, a series of work sessions to get all those organized and understood. The exciting part of how that relates to phase 3, again, each one of these builds on the phase before it. Collaboration, it's a really short description up there. It just says evaluate and prioritize potential opportunities. And that's really vague, but it's also really the crux of what, of the opportunities that we have here. And we talked a lot about different projects that we have done in the past at PGAV, and it's not surprising that the collaboration and the coordination of different entities really is the heart of when you get great results. Every community is different inherently around the country and around the world, but here in Asheville, you know that we have city projects, county projects, a lot of folks working independently, even private projects that are being considered. This collaboration phase starts to look at the broad list and start to see how they relate to each other. You can picture examples of a project that is, even from a locale standpoint, a project that is here and a second project that is here, that they're not talking to each other and they have no idea that each other exists. But if you put a small project to link them together, think of what the great opportunity is for the city and the county. So the sum of the parts ends up being greater than the whole quite often. We have other examples, either current projects we're working on now or past, where this collaboration has been key. We have projects with the Columbia, South Carolina, SC State Museum, where you have a state-owned entity with a private entity working together with the city, and the private entity was actually the one that came forward and said, I would really like to do a master plan because I see how this would affect my future, and working together with the city. Same thing in San Antonio right now. We're working with San Antonio for the Alamo project, where we have state, city, and private entities all working together to redevelop a core of the city. So you can see how these things are. This situation that you have is not unlike other ones throughout the country. And honestly, we're very excited for this phase, and we're excited from a schedule point of view to leave a good amount of time for this collaboration to happen, because not just from schedules to get everybody around the table, but we know that it's going to take a couple rounds to be able to find these opportunities and make all the series of projects that we have on the list even better than what they are now.
Yes, John? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you to elaborate more. I think the community is having a hard time understanding what we mean by the tourism management part of this, and how, investments can help to restore, the landscape of this place that feels like it's a place where people live, where residents enjoy going. Can you just talk about, in your experience, like, what are some, when we say tourism management, is it applies to urban design? Can you just talk broadly about, like, some of the strategies that communities are using to help mitigate the impact of feeling like it's all about tourism?
Yes, absolutely. And you said what I was going to say, which the third bullet there, develop tourism management and urban design strategies. And I think while it sounds fairly simple and straightforward, I think, Stephanie, you would agree that as we look around the country, there's a growing need for this kind of approach. I think a community-based approach that is taking into account both best practices in tourism management and urban design, and finding solutions in that combination. So one that's very applicable here in Asheville, I think, that we find is the issue of density in the downtown area and the need to distribute visitors, and using urban design strategies to encourage visitors and residents, frankly, to walk, to use pedestrian opportunities and other opportunities to explore a broader range of the geography of the community. So John's worked recently on a project in Vancouver that has this exact thing, and actually I think some of the strategies that are coming out of that are very strong from the standpoint of sort of what you said before, connecting the dots, but using urban design techniques and tactics to help encourage visitors to experience a destination in a certain way. So this is for me, that third bullet is frankly where this project may in fact become a model for other communities as they seek the opportunity to try to figure out how to strike this balance and work with the interests of tourism management and urban design together.
During our phase 2 meetings, a lot of people are already talking about design standards, right? But for years we've been talking about the need for a lighting design standard, or a streetscape design standard, or public amenities design standard. Sometimes it is a formalized process of creating those standards that you can use for years for other folks on future projects to follow, to make it a cohesive place. Other times it is design work and urban design strategies that are individual, that to solve a certain problem, and whether it's connectivity or whether it's dispersion, that are localized. And so we're going to deal with both of those in this case. We would anticipate.
And in all of those cases, the design strategies are sort of locally authentic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not, I sort of, to Stephanie's point, I kind of fear people are thinking that, suddenly downtown's gonna feel like Disneyland, and, that's not where you're headed, right?
No, indeed. In fact, I mentioned that some of the themes that are emerging from the initial phase 1 work, and one of those themes is authenticity. And although while we've actually done research on authenticity and found that, you know, it means a lot of things to different people. I do believe that it is a valued aspect of this community, and so we work very hard to get in touch with that, and those findings will help serve as a guidepost as well. But most definitely.
There's so many like physical cues that help people understand like where you want to be and where you want to go, and and some of our visual cues right now are where there are a lot of people, right? And so if we can like add things to the landscape that create a sense of travel, or there's a visual identity, or an area is activated that's not active right now, that helps to spread people around, and lessen that feeling that there are too many visitors in one place, so that we can maintain the economic benefits of that money being spent at local businesses, employing people, while managing the part of it that the community does not like.
It's a great point, though. I mean, this type of work is functional from where Stephanie's going, but also celebrational of who you are in Asheville, and that's really a strong reason why people come in the first place and why they are living here. Right? The celebration of who we are in the sense of place. Pairing that with a functional reason, that is a lot of what these urban design.
And I think the really exciting thing is like to bring all these voices in, so that like the arts community, can help add, to the sense of place, by partnering with, maybe it's not just a sidewalk, maybe it's now also a public art project that also helps to provide employment and income for local artists. I think that's the kinds of things that are starting to emerge.
So that combo of the hard work of phase 2 and phase 3 together is what then leads to the final phase, which we're calling prioritization. A lot of folks think, all right, the last phase, it just means you're wrapping it all together and lining them up. Prioritization is much more than lining them up. We anticipate there's going to be many different filters that you can look at for that. So as we start to develop not only the list of assets and prioritize relevant to development, relative to funding strategies, there might be other categories of relevant to sometimes there's construction strategies relevant to on where you can get a benefit to do a project first and second, and if you flip them, you actually get less of a benefit. So funding, development, timelines, all those together will start to relate to the work that we're doing here relative to prioritization. And this is really the heart of why we're going down this road, this project, right? It's a proactive look rather than a reactive look, and the benefit of looking out holistically at all the potential, taking advantage of the collaboration, and then prioritizing it in a great order to look out 10 years. It is really the benefit of that. The funding options are key to this last stage as well. That's where you're going.
Yeah, you're right, exactly. I mentioned that earlier on, and so we will be looking at that, the issue of funding options at several points, and we are hopeful that as we talk to local government entities that this will also be part of the conversation. It won't just be about what we want to build, but how we're going to fund it. And so part of the result of phase 4 is that depiction of different ways that we can approach this. We all know that the list is long. TPDF funds would not, nearly cover this list, but we also believe that more can be done by a consolidated effort to tackle certain projects. And so that'll be also a very important result of phase 4.
There's nothing else, we can open it up for questions.
Anybody?
You already asked some good ones. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Joe's not here. Julie, you're up.
Oh, really? So later then we've got another agenda item. Oh, that's next.
Oh, sorry. Ladies.
We've got some work to do, some notes to shade.
But I just want to do a quick recap and remind you that before we release any of the TPDF funds, the grantee submits a request and we send out an engineering firm to go out and inspect the project. And so they're comparing, what we've agreed to in the contract, reviewing the scope closely, and verifying that the work is being conducted in the way in which we agreed to fund that. And the grantee is responsible for submitting a lot of backup documentation to go along with that. And then the engineering firm makes a recommendation. Yes, I've visited the site, verified that this work is complete, and I recommend that you release the funds to this project. So that is the step that is an important thing to remember. So the first request we have here is for the City of Asheville's U.S. Cellular Center project, and this project was initially supposed to be completed in November, and they've asked for an extension to January of 2020. Reason being is that their subcontractor ordered incorrect HVAC equipment. And so in order to get the correct equipment in, they ended up losing their window for installation and having to work around events that are already on the schedule. This pushes them back to January. So that is the motion for consideration right now, to extend this project completion deadline from November 2019 to January 2020. Does anybody have any questions on that one? Not to throw Chris under the bus, but he is here in case there are deeper questions that I can't answer.
I guess my question would be, does the subcontractor have any responsibility for having order capacity and?
That's a great
I
question.
guess my answer, you're gonna hear three of these, and so, we don't, this body doesn't have any operational oversight of any project. And, our interest is in, making sure that, we disperse funds for projects that are going to complete and that we get the full scope of, what was included in that contract. So you'll probably have questions that we are not able to answer. Chris Correll's here, I don't know if he chooses to answer that.
Yeah, I can answer that. The short answer is yes. The way the contract works, any additional costs that come from this issue that came up goes to that subcontractors, and we're tracking any additional costs, which is things like janitorial cleanup that we have to go through after events. We have to let them go make it really dirty again, and then we have to clean it up before the next event. So we're tallying all those costs, and that gets billed back to Johnson Controls.
Are there any other questions about this?
Get a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Second, Mr. Ross. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Number two, so Leaf Community Arts, as you know, is creating a Leaf Global Arts Center on the block, and their project is on track to complete within their deadline, which is February of 2020. When we were creating their contract, they actually negotiated, the standard contract calls for disbursements in thirds on completion of construction. And they negotiated a different percentage break based on their specific construction plan. So they are requesting to just change that percentage break for phase 1 and phase 2 based on a change in their construction priorities. Their contractor, Weaver Crook, actually had a medical injury, and there's supporting documents in your binders. But anyway, so that pushed back the warm shell completion. So they would still like to submit for their first disbursement, but for a smaller amount than they had originally negotiated. So that recommended action would be to amend the disbursement percentages in the contract for the Leaf Global Arts Center, allocating 30% to phase 1 and 47% to phase 2. And just so you know, phase 1 was supposed to be originally 56% payout. So they're just sort of shifting that around.
And our preference is, typically we are wanting to pay a third, and a third, so that we are tracking completion and ensuring that the project completes. Part of the evaluation of the third party is also identifying that there is enough money available to complete the project. So that's another way that we mitigate that risk of a project running out of money and not being able to complete.
Pat, what is this in dollars, 30%, 47%?
Their total grant was for $705,000. So
So the impact, so if this wasn't approved, then they would have to complete more of the scope with, without access to those funds before they would be able to submit for their disbursement. Does that make sense?
There's no change in the
Scope,
project completion?
No.
Date?
Their contract states for February 2020 completion, but I believe they are anticipating that happening much sooner. Yeah.
It's a really, really tough project, and I applaud them for, the preservation of this very difficult, I don't know how familiar you are with it, James, but man, when you walked into it, it's like, how could this building even be used again?
They actually have already moved their offices in upstairs, so it's, the center is not complete, and they are well underway.
So either way, we want to disperse the 30% until we have a report from our engineering staff.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
And the same thing will happen in phase 2.
Yep. Yes. So they can submit for a disbursement request, but the engineering would flag this and say this doesn't match the contract. So at this point, we
Right, it doesn't.
right.
Any other questions? Need a motion to approve, disapprove?
So, go ahead.
Give us a second.
Who seconded?
Mr. Stanley? All in favor?
Thank you. So number 3 is Center for Craft, and you may recall that they received a grant just last year also for $975,000. That represents about 1/3 of their total construction cost. And at this time, they actually just received their COs, and they have scheduled their grand opening and preview events. So everything is complete with the exception of one piece, which is the parklet. And that was presented during the proposal phase. And the parklet is basically turning 2 parking spots in front of the center into a park area to sort of activate that. And throughout the process, they discovered that the parklet actually sits, or the center itself sits on historic Cherokee trading route. So they are planning to take their time with this and engage the community and choose a design that sort of highlights this history. And this will basically set the completion of the parklet back 12 to 18 months. But the center itself is complete, and they are ready to open, and it will fully operate and offer all the programming that was presented throughout the grant review process. So they are requesting to remove the parklet from the scope and be able to submit for full disbursement of this grant with your approval.
I think staff's kind of feeling on this is that the parklet was not a room night generating element, of the proposal, and that that the project as it has been completed will kind of fully engage the room night aspect that is the kind of the main part of the evaluation of the award.
Yes. And the other piece is a lot of times we're funding up to 50% of the total project cost. In this case, we're closer to 1/3 of their total construction budget.
Would it be out of order to ask our friends at PGAD to help define what in the world a parklet is, just so we kind of get it?
Yeah, there's pictures of it.
There's
You'll
pictures
know what you
somewhere.
see. I'm sorry, I don't know what you found it.
It's basically, they were going to take out 2 parking spots in front of the building and make it into art, so people walking by can see that there's something going on,
Like
instead of just a street.
So 2 parking spaces could be a parklet.
Yes.
It's in the street itself.
Some seating and landscaping.
So they intend to complete that, but because of the discoveries of this heritage area, they are engaging in a longer planning process.
Just as an aside, I love the fact that it's a good collaboration story too, because they reached out to the city. They saw that one of the parking meters didn't have the pole was there and the parking meter wasn't there, so the city took that out, moved it down to a spot that could have been used as a parking to give them more space for their parklet. So they worked directly with the city. They reached out to them, worked together to get the city an extra parking, so not lose any parking space and get them their parklet. It was just anyway, good story. Sorry to interrupt you. You asked, so I loved it.
Well, and I'll add to that,
Yes.
the DOT, that is a DOT managed road, and we had to have DOT's cooperation in that as well, and they were very cooperative.
So, I was on the TPDF committee when this was approved, and part of the reason the parklet was good was because I think for the committee, no other member of the committee was here, but it was, at least for me, it would activate that side of the street as well, and the building right now with signage and everything, you would know something's there to go visit and to look at. So would they be adding some extra signage or something?
I'm not sure if you recall, and I apologize for not having a picture, but they have relocated their main entrance to the center of that building.
Right.
So that will also help to really showcase that this is a new asset to enter versus the entrance was sort of on the side corner. Yeah. Oh, actually, let me see if I have a picture for you. No, I'm sorry, this picture. I don't have any. No.
If they're gonna complete the project still, I believe the parklet still, would it not make sense to do it like leave, shift the payout schedule and then leave a remaining phase for the parklet existing, so that there's no like reapplication, et cetera, for like a separate TPDF item, it just.
Yeah, they don't anticipate, I mean, the cost of the parklet has already been raised. So we don't anticipate that they're coming back for additional funds. So
Okay.
it would have definitely been an alternate approach to identify the cost of it, but since we're not, we're paying for 1/3 of the total, we felt that the payout is justified based on the work that's been done and the percentage that is contributed. I mean, that if the board wanted us to go in that direction, we could identify the cost associated, take 1/3 of it, I guess, and hold that money to pay out, but,
and we don't have a specific number, but we're talking, that would be like 1/3 of $25,000 or something in that general range.
Right, so we'd be changing the scope and holding like $10,000 instead of just taking this out and paying them.
Can I withdraw the question?
Yes.
We have another hour to go.
$10,000 question.
So are there any other
Thank you for
questions?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Craig, Mr. Selwyn, all in favor?
Excellent.
Aye. That's an absolute yes.
Okay, I do have a couple more announcements. Sorry, Gary.
Sorry for the record.
Yeah, these are really exciting things, and we've had a lot of projects in construction for years now that are really about to open and make a big impact in our community. So the Center for Craft, which we just talked about, they are ready to open, are holding a special preview event, which you'll be receiving invitations via email. On November 15th, we'll be doing a check presentation. They're having a donor recognition at that event. And as part of the contract, we also negotiated for donor recognition that we would have a space in this center named for your contributions. So on the second floor, the assembly hall will be named the Explore Asheville Assembly Hall. And this will be like front and center for all of the meetings and co-working space, and so that's that. Any questions on that?
Just a comment, it's a beautiful space up there, I got a little preview of it.
Did you?
They're also gonna have they're training coffee roasters in the back, and the people who are tenants and get offices are gonna get all the coffee they can drink, so if you're looking for office space, it's a good place to check out.
Yeah, it's good coffee too, right? Do you remember who it is?
I don't remember.
Nice. So this is the farmers market, and I just wanted to showcase this. You all provided a grant for them to upgrade their retail market space, and during the grant process and the site inspections, the committee identified this as an opportunity to create a little visitor kiosk. So they have a very large number of visitors there, and so this is a mock-up but this is similar to what is at the chamber outside the visitor center. And so we'll have this panel, and that will sort of tie into the destinations, that copy is not correct, but that's being written right now, and tie into, our food and farm to table scene, and then we'll also have a way to distribute visitor guides there. And this is located in between the two markets, so that's always open. So if people come after hours, they still have access to this information.
Has anybody been there to see it since the new paint the doors? Looks a lot better.
Yeah. So that was a dream of the committee, and it's happening. So this is at the Wortham Center, and the TDA funded the upgrade to their theater and adding the 2 additional theater spaces, and in turn we have a naming opportunity for their courtyard. So this is a mock-up. This will be the Explore Asheville courtyard, which is right outside the entrance to the theater, and they are also about to open soon. And you should have a invitation in your binder, but they're having an open celebration and donor recognition, which we'll do a check presentation on October 15th.
Oh, John, put some flowers or some plants in that.
Yeah, we need a little landscaping. And this is the last one I wanted to show you, which is a really big deal, long coming. This is the Asheville Art Museum. So as part of the $1.5 million grant to the Art Museum, we have a naming opportunity for one of the main gallery spaces, and so this is a view on the 2nd floor. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to tour the place yet, but it's really amazing. But this will be called the Explore Asheville Exhibition Hall, and will house their main exhibits that they have planned. And so they also have a series of opening events. You have an invitation in your binder, but they have a brunch on November 3rd. We'll be doing a ribbon cutting ceremony on November 13th, and the grand opening to the public is November 14th.
And there's additional donor recognition that would say Buncombe County Tourism Development
Yes.
Authority in like the major donor
Mhm.
area.
That's toward the entrance. They do have a donor wall, and so the TDA will be referenced there as well. So that's it.
Good job.
Can I make a point of clarification, and you might wanna just explain this, that these recognition opportunities come after the TPDF grants have already been approved, so it's not like a quid pro quo,
Right.
it's part of the contract, after this is gone through. So just to clarify that, it's not a sponsorship.
Right. That's true. Any other questions?
Can I go somewhere?
I think so.
Okay, Councilwoman Mayfield, you're up.
So we have a moratorium on hotels for a year. As we've talked about, we'll be doing a lot of work in that year to look at what other communities are doing around management of hotels from a number of perspectives. I don't even know what those would be. But the Urban Land Institute will be helping us do that. There'll be 2 work sessions with them this fall. And then staff will take that information back and start working on it. There will also be a public process and public engagement around this. We don't know exactly what that'll look like yet. My understanding is that the plan is still to pull together a stakeholder group, and I think it would be totally appropriate to have somebody from this board and representatives of the tourism industry, and particularly the hotel industry, on that board. So, but again, we have not had a conversation yet about what that looks like. I'm sure staff will be coming with a recommendation on that soon. And I'm hopeful, I think probably a lot of the analysis that you guys are doing in this first assessment phase will probably be very helpful in that discussion as well. And, some of the other just good work and studies that the BCTDA has done over the years will be helpful. Any questions on that? Okay. We also last night held a public hearing on the proposed changes to the the voting districts. We did not vote last night. We'll do that at our October 22nd meeting. But I think it's fair to say that at least while there certainly is a difference of opinion, certainly the people who came last night, there was near unanimous support for removing the districts that were imposed on the city by the legislation and reinstating a primary. And so if I would anticipate that is what is going to pass on October 22nd, and so the calendar for that would be that candidates would file in December, along with candidates who are filing for every other office, virtually every other office, and then the primary would be in March, and then the election in November. We are in a bit of a unique situation because there isn't any other nonpartisan municipal primary in an even numbered year in the entire state, and there is no state law guidance on that. So we're doing something, surprise, surprise, that's new and different and unique, and we'll see what happens. So, and then just a word on kind of where the city is on short-term rentals. I think at the last meeting I reported that, you know, a couple of proposed changes had come before council last month. Those didn't get adopted, so we're sort of stepping back and looking at some of these things again. What I learned just a couple of days ago is that, and this is, you know, not unusual when you have somebody new. So our new city manager, Deborah Campbell, is sort of, you know, looking at this whole, all of our regulations around short-term rentals, and, you know, to some degree sort of scratching her head a little bit, like, why does all of this hinge on whether you have a stove in the kitchen? Like, why, you know, is there something else here? And, you know, so I think the staff is kind of stepping back. We're trying to, you know, go back to what were some of the original, what was the original intent around council's regulations, and can we find a way to have, I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say simpler, but is there
more clarity around
more clarity? You know, things that are just maybe make a little more sense to the outside world, and to permit holders, frankly. So, and to try to address some of the outstanding issues, because there are still some outstanding issues. I mean, this is what happens, right? You put a program in place, and people start to work under it, and they, you know, people push this boundary, and they push this boundary, and they push this boundary, and, you know, we just got to figure out, like, where is the boundary now? And so we might see some recommendations in October. I think that's probably a little early, but my guess is we will see some recommendations on that from the staff later this fall. And I want to thank the Homestay Network folks who continue to, you know, be, I think, very helpful in this process and talking to their members, and bringing back, you know, good information to the city. I think my hope is that can continue to be a collaborative effort. Thanks. And then kind of the final thing, again, something I've just learned in the last couple of weeks. I'm sure everybody's waiting with bated breath to know what we're going to do on e-scooters, and the answer is we're not going to do anything on them until probably early next year. There's a lot on everybody's plate. It's not really a priority for anybody. We're not getting, this is not an invitation for emails, but we're not getting any emails about it. Nobody's demanding e-scooters. So, in fact, to the degree that we get emails from them, it's people saying that they're terrible and we shouldn't have them. So, so there's just not going to be anything on e-scooters until next year.
Julie, with regards to the 72 Broadway project, I actually watched the city council meeting last night. It was better than Monday Night Football.
It was there, particularly if you stayed toward the very end, you got some real doozy stuff.
I did. My wife defaulted to, what are you doing watching that? But anyhow, it appeared as though the market, Mike McCreary,
yes,
and a lot of the citizens spoke in favor that they had made a concession with 72 Broadway to figure out a way to work on Saturdays.
Yeah, I think one of the problems there was that the city and the staff really wanted a formal easement, a dedicated easement agreement and a legal easement between the hotel and the parking and the Basilica parking lot, and the parties were not willing to do that. which to me says this is just a handshake agreement that can go away at any time, and then what do we do? And I think that's the fear, the ongoing fear of the folks in the market. It's an ongoing concern of mine, and I think others on council, is that, you know, sort of trying to jerry-rig a fix to this problem here in the last month might not end up being a long-term solution, and then suddenly if you have this building with 130-something hotel rooms and 40-something residential units, and they have no way in or out on Saturday morning, that the market's gonna get sacrificed, and people were just not willing to take that chance. You know, this is to me, the lesson out of all of this project is, and I do not understand how we got to where we are on this. The market has been there for several years. Everybody knows it. City staff knows it. You know, it's like this should have been before, you know, pen was put to paper. If they were proposing that was going to be their primary or only access point, this should have been one of the very first things that got figured out in the beginning. And it was not. It was left literally until the last month. And then as they were trying to figure it out, you know, their initial solution of using this alleyway, they proposed that without having conversations with anybody else who uses that alley. Also not acceptable. I mean, it's just, I realize these are big, complicated projects, but, you know, it's these kinds of things have just got to be addressed early on. You can't leave something as important as access, you know, to figuring something out at the very last minute.
Will the moratorium affect the Embassy Suite project?
The one that's still in litigation?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't think so, because they don't have, well, yes. So they don't have vested rights. So the only projects that can move forward are those projects that have vested rights, because that project was denied. They don't have vested rights. Now, I suppose it's possible that a court decision saying that the council was improper and the permit, the conditional permit, conditional use zoning, I'm sorry, CUP, conditional use permit should have been issued, might trump the fact that we really need a new word for that. Might supersede the moratorium. That's a good legal question. Richard, any thoughts on that? Yeah, I don't know.
As the TDA's attorney, no comment.
It's certainly possible. I mean, if the court said, yes, you should have issued this, you were wrong not to issue it, then that issuance would have become effective for several years ago, of course, long before the moratorium was passed. But don't quote me on that. I am a lawyer, but I really just play one on TV at this point.
It's good information. Thank you.
Any questions, anything else? Council does not have a meeting in our first meeting in October that we would normally have. It's Yom Kippur, so we don't meet again until the 22nd.
What about the Parisian location? The one that was the approved for the Parisian hotel?
It's in. I mean, it can keep going. I have no idea where it is.
They have rights till April.
Heard anything, any rumblings about?
They're trying to transact it. They aren't going to finish the project. I believe they're in contract with somebody to try to purchase it and assume the rights and pull permits prior to April. So.
Right. I suppose that's a good point, James, that there's sort of a back-end deadline on some of these projects that have been approved, that they get those vested rights only for a limited period of time. And if they don't start the project, then it goes away.
But that's for all projects.
Yes, for all projects, not just hotels. That's true. Oh, and I hope for those who watched and stayed to the bitter end, although this didn't happen at the bitter end, I did put in a plug for the TMIP process and encouraging people to be a part of that. You know, not surprisingly, in the context of the moratorium, we heard, you know, a lot of frustration around generally the tourism industry and hotels, and calls for lots of analysis and that sort of thing, and calls for changing the tax. And, you know, I made a point that that's not a thing that can be accomplished by the city working by itself. And as I've always said, my view is that the TMIP process is the best. It's the best process we have to have this public conversation and to try to find some consensus around how that money should be used,
Yeah, you
whether there
explained it
should be
very
any
well.
change to the taxes.
You explained it
Sharon Taylor. I'm with the Black Mountain Squandola Chamber of Commerce, but I'm representing today the steering committee for the Buncombe County Census Complete Count Committee, which is lots of words, and Samantha Cole from the chamber also sits on that committee. All of you all should have a packet. I'm not going to go through, that's a 45-minute presentation. I'm not going to start there, so I've got 5 minutes. But what we're reaching out to do is the census is coming, and it's coming fast. I sit on the subcommittee called the Recruiting Committee, and in order to make the census happen and be as complete as possible, Buncombe County needs 2,600 applicants in the pool before December 1. We have 650.
Applicants to be census workers, takers?
To be census workers and census takers. We also have an office in the city that opened the 23rd. They need 79 employees and they have 17. Many of these jobs are part-time. They're supplemental pay. They're not taking jobs away from anybody. It's a way to get extra money for a short period of time. People work from their own home. They set their own hours. So somebody is a server. And it's a great job for entry-level employees, for hospitality employees. It's bridge employment. You know, it rains one day, so they can't go zip lining, so the person can go do the job. The goal this year for Buncombe County is to have an 80% completion. The last census it was 72. And the impact that it makes on the community is that each person is worth $1,600 per year. So if 1,000 people do not fill out the census, that eliminates over $16 million in potential federal funding returned to the community. And that funding impacts school meals, public transportation, foster care, housing. In your packet is a 3-page list of federal funds that are returned back to the community. So what I'm asking for is your support in trying to recruit people within your all's industry to apply for these jobs. It's all online. Not all of these people will be hired, but the pool has to be there by December 1 because everybody has to go through a background check, fingerprinting, training, and we know that life gets in the way, so somebody might apply for a job and then not be available in March. But these people will be on the ground in March. There are already some people on the ground doing address verification. The jobs are $14 an hour, so it's pretty good money for college kids, for anybody that's working part-time, full-time, and just wants extra pay for the census. Samantha and I can answer more questions if anybody has after the meeting is over with. So we appreciate your support that you can give us.
So Sharon is providing us with some content for the partner newsletter that will go out to 1,800 tourism-related people, and so we hope that that will also build some awareness of this.
And believe it or not, the most undercounted people are children under 5. And if you think about it, those children under 5 will be soon entering the school system, and those numbers strongly impact the meal programs, and we all know about the food deserts for many of these children. So it's critical that we make this census happen as complete as possible. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Comments from the general public, anyone? Jim?
Good morning. Each one of you should have received an email from me saving the date for October 7th. And then you should have also received an invitation, except for James, and you'll get one today, for the Southern Conference tip-off luncheon. So it'll be, there's a reception at 11:30, lunch is at 12 on October 7th at the Renaissance. The new commissioner, this basically will be his first public appearance in Asheville, so we'd really like to have as many of you attend as possible as we welcome him and kick off this year for the Southern Conference tournament. So if you didn't get it, you can reach out to me and I'll make sure you get it. And then Julie, if you can also help with our elected officials. It's been sent to most everybody on our distribution list again, so but really would like to have you there.
It seems so far away.
It does.
Now it's almost here.
It is. I thought we just finished it.
Any other comments? Motion to adjourn?
That seems so tentative, like you wanna stay.
All in favor, aye?